Okay. Let's start recording the class, guys. Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a very nice weekend. I try to enjoy it. So today is week number 2, guys. Week number 2. We are on week number 2. And during this week, we're gonna talk about new topic. Now we are going to enter into the China dynasties, okay? China dynasty. Today we're gonna talk about, this is one of the principal dynasties. In China, there were like 3 very important dynasties. This is the most important, the Zhou dynasty, okay? And they live in this area over here, this area. All these countries that you see, the color green is China. It's a very big country. Over here, we were over here last week in India. This is India, and over here is China. All of this is China, okay? So let's begin, guys. The Zhou dynasty ruled for hundreds, por cientos de años, siglos. But China faced chaos for some of that time. The Zhou dynasty lasted longer than any other dynasty in China. La que más duró, más que cualquier otra duró en China. Okay, now this is a timeline where it tells you how long was this dynasty. They began in 1200 BC. And they over here, they lasted until this year, 771 BC, invaded Zhou capital. They were invaded. And then we're going to talk about this very important philosopher in China, Confucius. Okay? So let's begin, guys. Let's begin. Now, the Zhou political. When the Zhou dynasty, they created a very important political system. It says, the Zhou king claimed to possess the mandate of heavens. Le decían que Dios lo habían puesto ahí, los cielos lo habían puesto ahí para que él sea el rey en ese imperio, ¿ok? Principal similar in Europe. En Europa también tenían esa misma mentalidad, que el que era rey era enviado del Dios o de los cielos. Igualmente, acuérdense, en Egipto, el faraón era una persona muy poderosa y decía que era la conexión entre los dioses y el pueblo. ¿Ya? La misma idea era aquí más o menos en China. So rulers' power was not absolute. If a king was found to be bad, si el rey era malo, entonces dice que el mismo cielo le enviaba a otro líder para que lo sustituyese. Heaven would support another leader, says. The Zhou came from an area west of Shang Kingdom. Early Zhou rulers used the mandate of heavens to justify their rebellion against the Shang. The Zhou believed that the Shang gave up the mandate of heaven when they did not rule in the way the Zhou thought was best. Así que ahí entraron. Entonces, como el rey que estaba antes de los Zhou era de Shang, entonces vinieron los Zhou porque dice que se estaba portando mal en la dinastía Shang, se estaban portando mal y vinieron de la dinastía Zhou a encargarse de gobernar China. The Shang over here, en esta área comenzaron ellos a gobernar. The Zhou established a new political order. They granted land. Ellos le entregaban una tierra para que los trabajasen. Los que vivían ahí trabajaban esas tierras y todos los frutos de esa producción de esa tierra iban para el rey. Okay, the Zhou king was at the highest level. Estaba arriba de todo este sistema político. He granted plot of land to lord. Ellos le daban un grupo de tierra a unas personas que se llamaban los lords. Ellos se encargaban, eran como gobernadores de ciertos terrenos. Y entonces los lords le entregaban un globo de tierra a los peasants, a los agricultores, para que ellos trabajaran en esas tierras, y entonces los frutos de esos se los pagaban a los lores y los lores se los daban al rey. Pero llegó un momento en que los lores pensaban que ellos eran más poderosos que los kings. ¿Ok? Entonces ellos se rebelaron y comenzaron las guerras entre los lords y los reyes. Ya se querían independizar porque le habían dado esas tierras. Eso no era así. Aquí entonces comienza la decaída del poder de los Zhou. As loyal of the king, less than many refused to fight against invaders in 1771. Invaders reached the capital, much like the story of the boys who carried out the wall run. Eso no importa. Vamos acá. After the defeat of Lord began to fight each other. By 481 BC, China had entered in an era called the Warring States. Ellos entraron en una guerra que era the Warring State, una época de guerra, había mucho conflicto. Period and time of many civil wars. Había mucha guerra, mucho conflicto y toda la China se dividió. Y eran pequeños grupitos que querían dominar sobre el otro. Armies grew, fighting became brutal and cruel as soldiers fought for territory, not for honor. Internal problems, problemas internos. The decline of the Zhou took place along with important changes in China's family structure. La familia, en China, la familia era muy importante, pero en aquel entonces la familia comenzó a desintegrarse y entonces los hermanos no se odiaban y querían todas las riquezas que hace su familia, querían robarla y ser los únicos dueños de esas propiedades. Now, he said, the wealth of the father sometimes tried to maintain peace by dividing his land among his sons. But this created new problems. Each son could build up his wealth and then challenge his brother. Entonces, en esa época que había mucho conflicto entre las familias y todo esto, aparece este señor que se llama Confucio. During the last Zhou period, thinkers came up with ideas about how to restore order in China, idea de cómo restaurar el orden en China. One such person is Confucio. Confucio fue un pensador, un filósofo, pensador en aquella época en que había mucho conflicto en China, chicos. Became the most influential teacher in China history. Confucio is a Western form of the China title Master Kong or Confuci. Confucio said that the China need to restore to ethics. Deberían retornar a la ética. The ideas Confucio are known as the Confucianismo. Confucianismo se llama. Es la idea de Confucio. Confucio wanted China to return to idea and practice from time when people knew their proper rules in society. Él quería que todos regresasen en la época en que cada uno tenía su responsabilidad y su asignación en la sociedad. These are the basic guidelines that Confucius believed would restore family order and social harmony. Confucius' ideas about government were similar to his idea about family. ¿Cuál era la idea? Estas tres, 1, 2, 3, 4 y 5. 5 ideas. The father should display high moral values to inspire their family. Quiere decir que los papás tenían que demostrar muchos valores morales aquí para que su familia sea inspirada y todos tuviesen un nivel de moral alta. Dice, children should respect and obey their parents. Los hijos deberían respetar y obedecer a sus padres. And all family members should be loyal to one another. Y todos los miembros de la familia deben ser leales uno hacia el otro. Ese es el otro principio. El tercer principio, the third principle. Moral leaders, not law, brought order to China. Dice, los líderes morales, no la ley, deberían traer el orden en China. O sea, deben haber buenos líderes para poder traer orden a China. Dice, a king should lead by example. El rey debe guiar con su ejemplo. Inspiring good behaviors in all of these subjects. Inspirando un buen comportamiento a todos sus súbditos. Así que el rey es una figura muy importante. It's like the father. The lower class would learn by following the example of their superiors. Las clases bajas deben aprender de los ejemplos de las clases más altas. O sea que todos deben mantener un mismo estándar de conducta. ¿Ya? Esos eran los 5, the five principles that they promote, the Confucianismo. Okay, después vinieron otros filósofos como digamos con Lao Tzu y Han Fei Si, que ellos, el Lao Tzu promovió el daoísmo y el hafeizi, el legalismo. Muy bien. Now, Confucius traveled to many different regions. Confucius viajó a muchas regiones. He earned the reputation of a respected teacher. Le ganó la reputación de un maestro muy respetado. He believed that when people behaved well and acted morally, they were simply carrying out what heaven expected of them. And his ideas were passed down through his students and later compiled into a book called Analectic. The Analects. Él creó un libro, este libro, The Analects, Confucio, donde están todos sus principios y sus pensamientos. Okay, now let's stop right here, guys, and let's watch a video, try to summarize all that we just
Okay, let's talk about the Zhou Dynasty. The Zhou Dynasty is in China. Who would have thought? And now if you notice, the Zhou Dynasty is getting a little bit bigger than the Shang Dynasty. And one thing you should also notice is that the Zhou Dynasty is still surrounding the Yellow River. Okay, and the Yellow River looks like that. Yes, it truly is yellow. Okay, now the significance of the river is that, all early civilizations settled around rivers because that's where they got the water for the crops and the crops to eat, and, you got to eat to survive. So rivers are pretty important. The Zhou Dynasty ruled for a pretty long time, okay, a little bit longer than the Shang Dynasty. They ruled from 1046 BC to 256 BC, and that is almost 800 years. One idea that came out of the Zhou Dynasty was this idea called the Mandate of Heaven. And this happened a lot in the ancient world. This is the idea where leaders claim that they were the son of the gods. Okay? And the gods basically told them that they could rule. And how this works is if the leaders ruled the people well, then heaven allowed them to rule. But if they didn't rule the people well, then heaven would send all sorts of signs of displeasure, such as floods and earthquakes. Feudalism is another idea that came out of the Zhou Dynasty. And now, this is a system of a relationship between landowners and their tenants. So here's how it worked. You got the king who ruled the entire empire, and that king gave land to his lords. Okay, and his lords would basically rule the land. The lords, in return, would send soldiers to the king in order to protect in case of any sort of attack. So the soldiers, or vassals as they were known as, protected the land. These little guys down here, they were the peasants. Okay, they farmed the land. Okay, and how feudalism works is the peasants gave a small portion of their crops up to the lord, and the lords would give some sort of payment to the king for being allowed to rule that land. So really, the king is the one who's benefiting from this system. Okay, as they say, it is good to be king. Now, the Zhou Dynasty is also known for a bunch of philosophers to come out of those 800 years of rule. Okay, one philosopher was a guy by the name of Lao Tzu, okay, and he was the founder of Taoism, and Taoists basically believe in achieving harmony with nature and being virtuous or good. Okay, another handsome man to come out of this dynasty was Confucius. Okay, Confucius was the founder of Confucianism, and basically the goal of Confucianism was a just and peaceful society. Okay, and basically here's how it works. Society worked well when all people acted properly based on their roles and relationships with others. Another man to come out of this dynasty was a man by the name of Han Feizi. Okay, and he actually lived a few hundred years after Confucius and Lao Tzu. This is towards the end of the Zhou Dynasty, and he taught an idea called legalism. And legalism's ideas were based on the idea that people were selfish and needed to have strict laws placed upon them. Now, all good things must come to an end, and here's how the Zhou dynasty ended. You see, you got all these states during the Zhou dynasty, okay? And these states don't get along, and they happen to fight with each other. Okay, this was called the Warring States period. And like every fight, somebody's going to come out on top as the most powerful. And it just so happens that the winner was, drumroll please, thank you, this guy, the Kingdom of Qin. Okay, so you'll learn more about him in a couple days. And that's it. Here are some sources. Thanks for watching.
Okay, now let's watch another video, guys.
Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of 5 Minute History, or Quick Chinese History, or whatever the heck I call this series. Today I'm going to be talking about the Zhou Dynasty, and the Zhou Dynasty is probably the most important, complicated, confusing time in Chinese history. This is intended to be an overview, so I am probably going to miss a lot of points, but I'll try to cover the essentials, okay? Let's get started. The Zhou Dynasty lasted from about 1046 to 254 BCE. That's a long time, you guys. And it's basically split into two parts, the Western Zhou and the Eastern Zhou. The Zhou Dynasty is considered one of the most important, if not the most important, Chinese dynasty because of the emergence of a lot of foundational parts of Chinese culture, things like the Tao Te Ching, the Mandate of Heaven, the Analects of Confucius, the emergence of legalism, the emergence of a lot of things that are considered fundamental to Chinese civilization. They all came about during this time, so it can't be overlooked in a study of China. Now, the Zhou coexisted with and at times were a tributary state to the Shang, and they're living in what is now known as Shanxi province. And after they conquered the Shang, they set up the new dynasty, the Zhou dynasty, under King Wu, although some people credit it to his father Wen. But, oh well, the dynasty started. Now, the dynasty begins kind of rough because after only 2 or 3 years of ruling, King Wu has to go and die. Hooray, right? And then after he died, there's a whole string of rebellions and revolts from like all the different regional rulers and all the different tribes and things like that. It's chaos. And so a new king is brought into power. His name is King Cheng. But the thing is, he's not very experienced. So there's a duke, the Duke of Zhou, who is trying to help him and does things like he comes up with the Mandate of Heaven for one. He comes up with the Fengjian system, which we'll talk about in a minute. And he also starts placating all these tribal leaders and like people of the Shang, giving them titles of nobility, giving them land, things like that to make them happy. And so the revolts and rebellions kind of die down a little bit, I mean. However, there is a problem. This territory that the Zhou dynasty are ruling is a little bit too big. They have to decentralize it a little bit. They have to break it up a little bit. So they establish what is called the Fengjian system. And the Fengjian system is almost like European feudalism because the emperors offer the Feng, this land, to the local lords, and they establish basically what are vassal states called Jian. So we have the Fengjian system. It starts out really clearly defined, and it is a proper system we can easily keep track of, but it doesn't always stay that way. Now, under this system, male nobles were granted troops and domains based on their rank within society. And eventually the people, kind of everyone else, are split into what are called the 4 occupations. Now, these occupations are eventually developed from Confucian and legalistic philosophers. So they're the ones who come up with the 4 occupations a little bit later. Now, this all sounds well and good and very European and all that, but there's a key difference between European feudalism and Chinese feudalism, the Fengjian system, and that is people who are born into a certain class in China, like if they were born to the Gong class, the craftsman class, they don't have to stay in that class forever. They can, change to whatever class that they want, based on their desires or their aptitudes, things like that. So people aren't necessarily stuck into roles forever. So that is a key difference between European feudalism and Chinese feudalism. But there are more differences between the two. We can get into them, on another day. Nothing lasts forever, and the Fengjian system is no exception. the local lords start competing with each other, and there's all these rivalries, and these rivalries really overpower the sense of loyalty to the Zhou itself. So in some of these houses actually were able to rival the power and prestige of the Zhou. Now, things are already bad, and then the 12th king of the dynasty, King You, decides to make things even worse by deposing Queen Shen and the crown prince in favor of some other people. And so Shen's father, who's understandably pissed off, mounts an attack against King You, and Yo gets killed. Boo-hoo, right? And the capital is moved eastward. It's moved from Haojing to Chengzhou, and Haojing was in present-day Xi'an, and Chengzhou is in what is now Luoyang. So that's the beginning of the Eastern Zhou dynasty. The Eastern Zhou really marked the decline of the dynasty. Everything descends into chaos, and after the capital is moved, they really lose a lot of their power, and they become a figurehead of basically all the other states who are doing just basically whatever they want. And this period becomes known as the Spring and Autumn period, which will get its own episode, as well as the following period after that, which is the Warring States period, which is obviously not good even by the sound of the name, right? During this Spring and Autumn period, there are about 150 states that exist at this time. Most of them get absorbed into the four big ones, which are Qin, Jin, Qi, and Chu. And this is a really crazy time because they are all like annexing each other, they're declaring war against each other, they're having claims against each other, and the power is shifting from one person to the next all the time, from one moment to the next. And eventually all this fighting leads to what's known as the Partition of Jin and the Warring States period. Now, the Warring States period, I think you can guess, is a period where we see a lot of war. All of these different states I just mentioned and a couple of others, they're fighting in this struggle for hegemony, and eventually you see the victory of the Qin state and the establishment of the Qin dynasty. So, hooray, fantastic. We have a united China after the end of that. However, it's not all bad news. With all this constant upheaval and this war and this fighting and all this stuff, it inspires this guy named Sun Tzu to write a little book you might have heard of called The Art of War. And he's not the only one. There's a guy named Confucius, you might know him. There's a guy named Lao Tzu, you might know him. There's a guy named Xiangyang, you might not know him. There's a guy named Mencius, who you may or may not know. But all of these people emerged in the same.
Okay, let's stop right here. This guy talked too much, but he tried to summarize this a very important period in China's dynasty. Okay, guys. Now it's 9:46. You need to go to another class. Then see you tomorrow, guys. Bye bye. Take care. Bye.